Okay, so officially, I'd like to open the second day of our Boredom conference, the fourth edition. Today we have a pedagogical panel. We're starting with our educational panel. We have three wonderful presenters, and I hopefully go smoothly. And we have a wonderful discussions after each presentation. So the first presenter is Anke Zeißig from Germany, from Cottbus, Technische Universität, and she will be presenting about boredom and creativity, contrast or connection. So maybe we learn even more than yesterday. We had an introductory presentation for your presentation, so I hope to learn a lot here. And Anke Zeißig is finished her studies of sculpture and visual media at Dresden Young Academy of Fine Arts, and she is doing her postgraduate studies. She explored mental states like purposelessness, ongoing continuous presentness. And after completing her studies, she examined various emotional states through the process between introspective perception and artistic formulation. In addition, she worked as an innovative teacher, realizing art meets science concept at school. And after her maternity leave, she proceeded to study psychology at the Technical University of Dresden, and her final thesis was entitled Introduction of Creativity, How Emotional States Influence Creative Thinking. And now, as a research assistant, she's continuing with scientific research. So we hope to learn something about this very research of yours. So take the floor.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. I'm very glad to be here. And I thank you, Josefa and Mariusz, for organizing this conference. So can you see my screen? Yeah, great. Okay. Yeah, you told I like to continue the subject that Annie started yesterday, boredom and creativity, contrast or connection. Well, there were 3 points that brought me to that topic. First, I got a lot of practical experience as freelance artist and innovative teacher in several projects at museums and schools. And it was always been interesting to me to experience when boredom arises, when creativity, and when the two go hand in hand together. The second was I did a lot of boredom research for a long time as an artist, trying to capture the essence of boredom by examining that emotion through the lens of a camera. And my presentations of the boredom video led to very unexpected reactions for me. You know, as an artist, I do not make the films to trigger or induce a particular emotion in a recipient. I made the film just to understand something about boredom, for instance. But the viewers really got bored extremely quickly, shuffling their feet, coughing, make noises, groaning. But every time, some of them told me that after a while, they became very calm, their heads cleared up, and new thoughts came to them. So I can put a link in the chat afterwards if you maybe want to try out this in the next break. And I wanted to know if this is really possible, that boredom can promote creativity. And so I carried out an empirical experiment, finishing my second studies in psychology in 2015. And I have proved the effect of induced boredom in comparing with other emotions on measurements of creativity. And I'm just flying over here to give you an idea of my background. But I want to show you two results. So first, I have controlled if the emotion induction really works. And you can see here for the boredom group, for instance, the gray bars are the most noticeable emotion at the first minute of the intervention, and the black bars is the most noticeable emotion at the last minute of the intervention. Intervention took 6 minutes. And you can see in the boredom group, most of the participants felt bored at the end of the intervention. And compared with the joy group, for instance, most of them felt pleased at the end. They got a funny video. Yeah. And on the other side, you see the results just for the boredom group. And there were different results for the measurements of figural creativity. This is the blue line, or the blue lines, and verbal creativity, the red lines. I measured fluency and diversity of creative thinking. And figural creativity increased from before intervention to after intervention. And while verbal creativity decreased. And compared with the other groups, boredom was the best for figural creativity, but not for verbal creativity, of course. So boredom and creativity, contrast or connection. Here we go. I want to put a focus on the relation of boredom and creativity in the school context, yeah? And this is the start of my doctoral thesis, and I'm supervised by Professor Ludwig Biss and Professor Julia Möller, to whom I'm very grateful. So it was found that boredom is a very common emotion in everyday school life, and it has implications for academic performance and, of course, for disruptive behavior in schools, and many other things. Of course, we've heard yesterday a lot of that. And creativity in school is emphasized as a key competence for the future. But the development of creative skills in school education is a major and a very difficult challenge for the education systems. And it was determined that the ability to think creatively has been declining for years. So maybe we have too much boredom and too less creativity in our schools, or in many schools. And with regard to the relation of boredom and creativity, contradictory findings exist. So on the one hand, studies demonstrated boredom has a negative impact on creativity, and in contrast, the findings such as the positive relationship. So I decided to start right from the beginning with literature research. And I want to find studies that examine the relationship between boredom and creativity in school. And school seems to be a very popular research topic, but that does not apply to creativity and certainly not to boredom. That looks more like finding the needle in the haystack. And it was my task in the review to find and analyze the articles that cover the intersection of all the three research topics. So I wanted to find out how many empirical studies have even examined the relationship between boredom and creativity in school context. How many of these studies find positive, negative, or other relationships? And if there is evidence that positive or negative relationships differ at the state or the trait level. I like to show you a first model that I created to have a structure for looking at what kind of relationship between boredom and creativity has already been empirically studied. And to develop the search strategy, I used the scheme of Gogh, Oliver, and Thomas, as well as I followed the methodological framework of Nordhausen and Hurd and Arksey and O'Malley. 10 literature databases were searched and additional articles were found via Google Scholar and lists of references. So in sum, 2,849 articles were the starting point for the identification process of relevant studies. We followed the PRISMA standards to exclude irrelevant articles by screening the titles in the first step, then screening the abstracts, and so on. And in the end, there were 24 articles left, which included a total of 33 studies, empirical studies. And these studies have determined the following results on the relation of boredom and creativity. Well, 12 studies found a negative relationship, 10 a positive, 3 studies find both, and 8 studies no relationship between boredom and creativity. So this is really interesting, but also confusing. And one reason for these contradictory results might be that it makes a difference whether one examines situations or personality traits of boredom and creativity, or the interaction of both. So remember the initial model. We hypothesized that perhaps there is a systematic difference whether research is done at the level of states or traits. And so we have analyzed the positive and negative effects related to boredom and creativity as a state, as a personal characteristics, and or as an interaction of both. But we could not confirm our hypothesis. Instead, we found that there were positive and negative effects, regardless of whether the research was conducted at the state or the trait level, or that the connection between boredom and creativity on trait level has not been investigated much so far. So I think this result is the most interesting and unexpected. The studies that focused on examining situational parameters found equal numbers of positive and negative effects. For example, bored states led to more creativity, but also to less creativity. And creative states also led to more boredom, just as they led to less boredom. So in our further analysis, we will examine the boundary conditions and methodological differences in the studies we found in more detail now, because the studies we evaluated differ in their measurements for boredom and creativity, in study designs, in samples, etc. But for the moment, I have to say there's evidence that the relation of boredom and creativity is both contrast and connection. And we hope to find some indications if there are reasons in the study designs for samples or sample characteristics why the study find whether positive or negative effects of the boredom and creativity relation. But on the other hand, I would like to look also qualitatively for clues to support an idea. And in the last minutes, let me do some considerations. It seems that from a state of boredom, creativity may arise or not. But why? We know of studies that have looked at different factors that could be related to this or act as moderators or mediators on the relationship between boredom and creativity. And I think there will be further more findings from the researchers in the near future. But perhaps it is also important to ask whether students in a state of boredom at school have the opportunity to be creative at all. As long as schooling insists that pupils sit still, pay attention only to the teacher or the given tasks, and give the answers that the teacher already knows, school and boredom is a relationship that prevents from being creative. So is there any space, reason, and time at all to be creative at school? Are students really allowed to yawn, lay down on the table, move around, daydream, draw, read, craft, do anything else, rest, interact with others, follow their inspirations, seek stimulation, get more tasks or less, work faster or slower, use waiting time for other interesting things, or continue working on their own projects or thoughts and get support for it? Maybe we can use our research to help find the important factors that need to be changed in schools and not in the students. Once Julian Jaynes wrote down the words he heard from a colleague: the 3 B's, the bus, the bath, and the bed. That is where the great discoveries are made in our science. And I would find it a wonderful vision to contribute with research that one day the word school also fits into this enumeration. And I got yesterday an inspiration from the philosophers section, namely the 2 various views of Edgar Allan Poe, that boredom is the empty stomach of the mind, and from Blaise Pascal, on the other hand, that without hunger for spirituality, we become bored. So I want to close now with 2 questions. How do we learn what we are actually hungry for? And how can school provide what the students need to be satiated in mind? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.